Hi guys, electric cars. What's going on with the electric car industry, the EV industry? Well, it seems to be that things are constantly changing in that arena, so it seems worthwhile to regularly update you on what's going on. So right now, on the face of it, it would appear that the EV industry is actually doing really well. It's growing, and the car industry is responding to legislation and government requirements to increase the number of EVs. They're putting out bigger, better numbers of EVs than ever before. They're creating more of them. They're putting more out to market. So it seems to be on the up. However, everything is not as it seems, because the trouble is that whilst the government seems to want them and the industry is responding, it looks like perhaps the buyers don't want them, or maybe are not quite ready for them. And I'm beginning to wonder if this push to force feed electric cars to motorists and buying public is maybe scuppering them in their infancy.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Right, so what is... oh, look at this. I gotta get a video of this. Look at this. That's an interlude right there. Okay. So global demand for electric vehicles is growing, but it appears it's not growing fast enough and not quite at the prices that the car industry, the car makers, actually need for them to make it work. And this is according to a report in Reuters by Joseph White, their global automotive correspondent. Now, he says that the theory of this, not being at a sufficient rate really to be viable for the car industry, is backed up by a recent failed truce in China when it came to electric car prices. So it seemed that on a Thursday, Tesla and 15 other car makers in China actually signed a pledge to avoid what they call abnormal pricing. What they meant by that is price cutting, basically. And this agreement was actually brokered by the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers, CAM for short. And it appeared to be a truce in the EV market that was, or the market itself was being led by obviously Tesla and BYD, a massive Chinese brand, which of course is now here as well in Europe and the UK. The thing is, that was on Thursday. By Friday, Tesla started discounting again. So it didn't last very long. And then of course other manufacturers followed suit. So General Motors, for example, which has Cadillac, and Cadillac just launched the Lyriq. I hope that's how you pronounce it, Lyriq. It's this super luxury SUV, electric SUV thing, sort of like an Escalade, but not quite, even sleeker than an Escalade. And they just launched that in China, and they slashed the price of that by 14%. So now it's actually $6,000 cheaper in China than it is actually in America. And Volkswagen also cut prices on its line of EVs. Now, the good news is that by doing this, by cutting the prices, by Tesla, BYD, Volkswagen, GM, cutting the prices, what actually happened was that did actually propel electric car sales, and that actually jumped by 25% last month, so in June. Now, the trouble is, that sounds great. That sounds like, oh wow, they sold more cars, so surely that's a good thing. The only trouble is that, of course, based on the margins, they estimated what their profits are going to be. And of course their profits just got, well, basically just got blown into the wind, really. It had no profits at all. And you may think, oh well, once again, so what? They didn't make any money, but they're still moving cars, so surely that's good business. Well, yes and no. In one sense you'd think it would be, but on the other hand, of course, industry responds to the viability or the financial viability of the company's value. And of course, by not being able to meet its targets, the shareholders are not happy, and in fact, by the Monday, share prices tumbled. Gosh, isn't it? It's amazing to see how the dominoes fall, right? So it appears that building more EVs than people actually want is not really helping anyone. Not the consumer, not the car industry, and to an extent, if you think about it, not governments that are supposedly trying to do this to clean up the environment, right? And this is, I suppose I'm sort of hinting on the fact that there's been all these reports and videos on YouTube, I'm sure you've seen them, of these EVs being stockpiled in fields in China now. They're all registered, so they appear to have been sold, but they're not being used. They're just being dumped in fields. So what about in America? Well, there's a similar situation going on there. So they have similar challenges. EV demand is growing with the help of Tesla's price cutting. So that actually happened in America and here in Europe as well a few months back. And in fact, Tesla actually beat Wall Street's guesses for quarterly deliveries. And Rivian, which is another EV company, they're well known for the electric pickup trucks, their second quarter deliveries were also well above expectations. So they've all done quite well. But here's the thing, EV sales are simply not growing fast enough to meet the ambitions of the players. Now, maybe with the smaller companies like Rivian, perhaps to an extent Tesla, it may be okay. But for the bigger companies, you know, as they say, the legacy players, it's a very difficult proposition because, you know, they're investing a lot of time, money, investment to pivot away from ICE, which is internal combustion engine cars, to electric cars. And so in order for them to justify doing that, they've obviously made projections in terms of their sales targets, revenue targets, volumes, and all the rest of it. And if they're finding that they're falling short of that, even though they might be selling cars, even though that's growing, but if they're falling short of being able to make money on it, then for them, it doesn't actually become viable, does it? For example, in America, although, like I said, there is the growth and all the rest of it, but in June, at the end of June, the dealers in America found that they were left with 100 days worth of unsold EV stock. Let me just let that sink in for a minute. That's about three and a half months or so worth of cars just sitting around. In Europe and UK, we still have waiting lists on new cars. You know, in the wake of the pandemic, we had huge waiting lists. They've come down, but there's still waiting lists on new cars. It's very rare to just walk in and get a new car off stock. In America, they've got 100 days worth of stock sitting around. You know, so so they are not actually keeping up with demand in that sense. They're not behind demand, they're well ahead of demand. And that's not good. In fact, that's actually double the level of inventory that the big three in America, so I'm talking Ford, GM and Chrysler, this is double what they wanted, that they projected and that they thought would be viable in the post-pandemic era. So this is way, way beyond what they wanted. And individual cars are being hit. So for example, if you look at for the Ford Mustang Mach-E, love it or hate it, I like it. I reviewed one, I've reviewed two actually, and they're on my channel. And I like them. I thought they were great. You know, they're playing on the Mustang name, but you know, they bring something different to the party. And to me, like a perfect Mustang family is to have the 5-liter V8 coupe and also have that for family reasons, right? And initially they did really well. You know, this was Ford's first foray into a full electric car. It's sexy, it's fun, it had a great evocative name. Seemed to be, and it's a good car, seemed to be doing well, but sales of the Ford Mustang Mach-E electric SUV fell 21% in the second quarter this year compared to a year ago. That's not good. Sales of the Ford F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck, so this is the electric version of their best-selling, most popular F-150 pickup truck, they doubled. So that's good news. They doubled from last year. This is the F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck. The sales have doubled, and in fact, Ford sold about 4,500 between 1st of April and June the 30th. So we're talking about 3 months. That sounds good, right? Well, apparently it's well short of what's needed because the company has ambitions to sell about 150,000 vehicles a year. And if you're thinking, well, that's a ridiculous number anyway, I mean, they shouldn't be having, you know, those sort of numbers. You know, let me just put this into context. Remember, I said that they sold 4,500 Lightning electric pickup F-150 pickup trucks in a 3-month period. With the F-150 regular petrol version, they sell about 2,500 of those a day. A day. It's their best-selling car. A best-selling car in America, in fact. A truck, I should say, but it's a car. It falls in the same category. And again, going back to the lyrics, the Cadillac lyrics, while in quarter 2, General Motors sold about 1,300 or just over 1,300 of those. And what about the Hummer, the new Hummer EV, the big, you know, rebirthing of the Hummer brand, you know, in this spectacular EV fashion that they brought to it, these big trucks, and I think it was featured, if I'm not mistaken, in Fubar, which is the Netflix show with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now I think there's one in there. How many have they sold? Well, that one that you saw in that TV show is one of 47. This is not good, because these are the lead products from GM for their new Ultium EV architecture. Now, GM is still selling EVs. They're selling the Bolt. So the Chevy Bolt's doing all right for them. They sold just under 14,000 of those in the last quarter, so that's not bad. But the only thing is, the Bolt is a bit of an old tech car now, and actually it'll be discontinued at the end of this year. So they can't really rely on that. It says something for potential for smaller EVs in the marketplace, but trouble is the profit margins are not great on those, and that's the trouble. What about here in the UK? Well, as I mentioned in the previous video, electric vehicle sales are up. They are up. They're up by a fraction under 40%, so 39.4% to be exact. But that's slightly below hybrids, which rose by 40%, and plug-in hybrids, which rose by 65.5%. And petrol sales only rose by 22%. But having said that, they remain the largest segment in the market. In fact, over 70,000 of the cars sold were petrol ones. If you want to add in mild hybrid petrol cars to that, because why not? Because most people don't really sell mild hybrid cars as hybrid. They just they have because it's just a 48 volt assistance technology, so they're not really full hybrids, but you know, technically, if you want to argue semantics. But if you want to add those in, that was about 29,000 cars. So in total, we're talking about 100,000 petrol cars were sold. Diesel and mild diesel cars, we're talking only about 13,000 cars. You can see how much diesels have fallen out of favor, how quickly they've fallen out of favor. Only 13,000 cars, which actually incidentally is the same number as plug-in hybrids. Hybrids alone, the regular hybrids, they sold about 21,000 cars, but the second highest number of the type of vehicle that was sold was in fact electric cars at 32,000 vehicles. So on the face of it, again, it seems like, yeah, electric cars are doing all right. They're growing, and it's not bad. But having said that, when you dig into the figures, what you find is that it's actually business and fleets that are buying those cars, not private buyers. And you can see why that's happening, because they've removed a lot of incentives on these things, but the benefit in kind tax benefit is still there for company car drivers. So a lot of people, BIK I think you call it. So I think a lot of people are still buying it on that basis. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. As for private buyers, it appears that they're still concerned about the core issues with electric cars that have still been there. So charging and now charging costs, because it's not as cheap to charge an electric car as it was claimed to be not long ago. And in fact, it was actually cheap not long ago. The driving range and the high purchase price is still things that are putting people off. High purchase price in particular, and driving range anxiety still remains a thing for a lot of people. And the other thing is that a lot of people still just don't understand these cars. They just don't get how they work. They just don't understand what they do. And they have concerns over the cars. So for example, I put a poll up on my YouTube channel, and about nearly 2,000 people have responded to that. So 1,800 people have responded to the poll. Only 2% of those people said that they actually had an EV. 3% said they were thinking about it. 6% said they were interested, but they were not sure if it was right for them. But a much larger 20% said that they had concerns when it came to electric cars. A whopping 70% simply said, no, we won't have one. We'll never have one. That's actually what they said. To be fair, I think it would be fair to say that being my channel, that there's a lot of petrol heads on there. So, but having said that, it's 1,800 people. So I guess that part of that must reflect the reality of the market. I'm pretty sure of that. And in fact, forget about my figures. There are, of course, reports in the press about manufacturers having to cut now their EV production simply because the demand is not there. Volkswagen in Europe is cutting back EV production as the demand for cars is about 30% less than the company's projected production figures. This decline in demand, as I was just alluding to, is as a result of reduced and stopped subsidies in multiple countries, including Germany, Sweden, and France. And of course here, the subsidies were removed some time ago as well. And of course they'll be taxed, and from 2025 they'll be hit with tax as well, car tax. Additionally, the plant's summer vacation will be extended. So this is going back to the Volkswagen thing. So not only have they had to reduce it, but they've had to extend the summer vacation. And that means that a certain number of the temporary employees that they take on, they're actually just going to have to lay them off because they just won't need them. Which is kind of sad if you think about it, sad for the industry as a whole. Now, in contrast, compare that to the production of the Volkswagen Passat ICE powered cars, so internal combustion engine cars, and production of those is continuing unchanged. So it's just continuing, like, it's not growing, it's not falling, whatever, as far as I know, but it's just continuing steady along. So you can kind of see what's happening there. When people don't know about something, or when they fear something, or when they don't understand something, they'll fall back on what they know. And what they know is internal combustion engine, right? That's what people know about. So what this says to me is that there's still a lot of work to be done. And the industry has responded to legislation from governments and authorities and all of these figures that say, oh, we got to reduce this internal combustion engine cars, and we got to increase electric vehicles. So the industry has responded. The trouble is that it's the government and the governments leading this, not the consumer. And this basic business premise has simply been forgotten in all of this by these massive experienced corporations, which is such a surprise that they're supposed to meet demand. Supply is created to meet demand. Supply is not created to meet legislation. That's not how it works. So if people don't want them, they're not going to buy them. So why are you building them? And I think they're starting to come to that realization. And I think this is a big problem, because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with EVs. I mean, they're very good cars, and every time I review one, I'm just impressed by just how good they are and how much better they're getting. Comfort, sensation, speed, performance, practicality, quality. I mean, they're just getting better and better. And all of the concerns regarding the issues that have been highlighted in the media about these cars, safety and what have you, they're mostly myths, they're not really true. But that's a different video. We'll tackle those issues in another time. But unfortunately, they're spread out there. There's all the misinformation regarding EVs. But having said that, as I've always said, the EVs are the right car for the right person at the right time. So they're not for everybody, certainly not in the current circumstances. At the moment, we still don't have the charging network for a lot of people. But, for me, for example, if you live in an urban environment, if you have short distances to travel, if you do a lot of that in traffic, and most importantly of all, if you're able to charge at home, then actually an EV is the perfect car for you, and you should probably get one. And I would recommend it to you. And I would consider it myself if I was in that situation. I am kind of in that situation because I live in the city, but I don't have facility to charge at home. So therefore, it's a big problem. And again, even being in Northwest London, the charging network here, I don't feel is actually sufficient. And also economically, not necessarily viable. So in terms of getting this information across and explaining to people what EVs are, how they work, whether they're right for you, what conditions and circumstances make them ideal for you, I mean, I'm trying to do the best I can. The media is trying to do its job. The car industry needs to up its game a little bit. And in fact, the car industry, my message to the car industry is maybe do less of these adverts where they do either one of two things. So they either go down the sci-fi route. So they're trying to go, oh, look, you can buy EVs because it's the future today. I mean, yeah, okay, it doesn't really work. And secondly, what's even worse is when they try to do the whole romance of motoring thing, and they show like they used to do with old cars, like show them driving in beautiful landscapes and mountains and all of this sort of stuff. But the reality is that, as everybody knows, you can't necessarily go exploring in an EV, because if you go out to somewhere where there's no charging, then very soon you're going to find yourself stranded. So you need to make sure that you plot a route where there are EVs, and when they show these incredible desert roads and mountain roads and stuff like that, you know that there's no EV charger there. So that's not the way to go. They're completely basically sending out a wrong message, is what I'm saying. As a result of all of this, it also doesn't help that word of mouth, of course, is obviously one of the most powerful things when it comes to processing how people buy products and services. And it doesn't help when I've been getting a lot of this lately with a lot of people that did actually switch to EVs, again, because of that, the benefit in kind tax breaks and the company car privilege and stuff like that. A lot of people that actually did shift to EVs are now shifting back because they've done the EV thing, they've done the experience, and they're like, yeah, it didn't work out for me. And they're actually shifting back. And that also, and of course, when they do that, they tell all their mates, they tell their network, and that doesn't help either. What I'm saying is that EVs are actually really good. They're getting better. They're definitely part of our solution going forward. But I think what's happening right now is we're putting the cart before the horse. We're trying to force feed EVs to people rather than convince them to go over to them by creating great cars with a good charging network and making it really convenient and easy to own one. We're not actually doing that. We're just forcing people to buy them. And I think that A, that's not working out, and B, it's actually putting people off, and C, I think what we're actually going to end up doing is scuppering the chances of the modern EV in its infancy before we've even given it a chance at all. This is not good. We need to rethink how we tackle electric cars in 2023. Let me know your thoughts.
Brown car guy.
Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit the like button and share this video as well if you can. And while you're at it, check out these guys who also sponsor my content. I am deeply grateful to them because it helps me to buy new equipment, put fuel in the cars, and yes, buy a cup of coffee. You can do the same. Just go here or right here on YouTube. Just hit these 3 little dots down here and click on thanks. Make sure you're signed in first. My content is free, but this is how you can help me keep it that way. I may even send you a gift. Oh, by the way, watch this next.